see Miss Monroe and Hiram. I see you there. And we're going to go live. Thanks, Justin. I was going to just do that first. I would like to welcome everybody to the meeting of the Baltimore County delegation. Today's meeting, we'll have a local fiscal briefing, followed by some voting and introduction of new bills. For that, I'm going to introduce whomever from DLS would like to kind of introduce the program and give us a rundown on the fiscal briefing. Will you guys be needing a screen so you can show us what you're talking about?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Arnold Aja is going to do the presentation along with Valerie Monroe.
Okay. Justin, can you give them screen privileges, please?
Yep.
Okay. You guys should be able to share your screens and you can get started whenever you like. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Chair Ebersol. Valerie Monroe and I will be presenting on state aid to Baltimore County. And Hiram Birch is here with us today, and he will provide support for any questions that you may have. Page 1. State aid to local governments will total $10.3 billion in fiscal 2024. And this represents 33% of total general funds and 26% of total state funds. In comparison, funding for state agencies account for 43.3% of general funds and 53.7% of total state funds. As you can see, state support for local governments comprises a very large portion of total state budget. Compared to the current year, state funding for local governments will increase by $863.7 million, which represents a 9.2% increase. This annual increase is much higher than provided in recent years. For example, state aid increased by 4% in fiscal 2022 and 6.7% in fiscal 2023. Baltimore County will receive $1.1 billion in state aid in fiscal 2024. Of this amount, $1 billion is direct aid and $104.3 million is for retirement payments. Baltimore County will receive an 8.3% increase in state funding in fiscal 2024, with total state aid increasing by $87 million over the prior year. Direct aid increases by $79 million, while the retirement payments increase by $8 million. On a per capita basis, state aid for Baltimore County will total $1,335 per resident, and this compares to the statewide average of $1,671 per resident. The information presented in the state aid overview report is based on the governor's allowance. However, DLS recently received notice from the Department of Budget and Management that the education aid numbers will be revised based on new net taxable income data from the Comptroller's Office and new enrollment data from the Maryland State Department of Education. Once DLS receives a supplemental budget from DBM that reflects the revised data, we will be updating the exhibits shown in the overview report. Now I'm going to focus our attention to the main factors affecting state aid allocations for fiscal 2024. Revised net taxable income and student enrollment data, and the increase in compensatory aid funding. So approximately 70% of state aid is allocated based on local wealth, which is measured by local property and income tax base. This represents the state policy to provide greater financial assistance to local governments with a lower tax base. The local income tax base is calculated by using data from income tax returns filed on or before November 1. In practice, the Comptroller's Office releases an annual report in December that shows net taxable income as of November 1 for the prior year. And this is used by multiple state agencies in calculating state education funding formulas. These formulas include the foundation program and several targeted programs such as compensatory aid, English language learners, and special education aid, which form the vast majority of state education aid. Due to the delay in processing tax returns In tax returns for tax year 2021, the Comptroller's Office had to release an updated report in January that included a more complete measure of the local income tax base. The delay resulted primarily from legislation passed during the 2020 session that allowed pass-through entities to make estimated payments on behalf of their resident members. The update in local net taxable income, along with revised student enrollment numbers from MSDE, will decrease state expenditures for education aid formulas by $38.2 million. However, the allocation of state education aid among local school systems will vary considerably, with 9 school systems receiving a higher anticipated increase in funding and 13 school systems receiving a lower anticipated increase in funding. In many school systems, the annual change in funding is significant. The anticipated increase in state funding will be $30.2 million lower in Baltimore County, $24.8 million lower in Montgomery County, and $2.1 million lower in Howard County. In Prince George's County, the anticipated increase in state funding will be $6.8 million higher. Even with the revision to the local wealth measure, Baltimore, Montgomery, and Howard counties will realize significant increases in direct education aid. So direct education aid will increase by $66.2 million, or 7.9% in Baltimore County, whereas direct education aid will increase by $71 million, or 8.2% in Montgomery County. In Howard County, direct education aid will increase by $25.8 million, or 7.8%. Now, turning to the second factor, the increase in compensatory aid. State funding for the compensatory aid program increases by $390.9 million in fiscal 2024, which accounts for 45.3% of the total increase in state aid. In Baltimore County, compensatory aid increases by $50.1 million in fiscal 2024, accounting for 57.7% of the total state aid increase. The significant funding increase is due to the sharp rise in the number of students approved for free and reduced price meals, which increases by 34.2% statewide and 34.7% in Baltimore County. This increase in the free and reduced price meal count is due to an alternative approach in identifying eligible students and not necessarily related to a downturn in the income status of the student's family. The Kerwin Commission recommended that the Medicaid eligibility be used to determine free and reduced price meals eligibility once MSDE and the Department of Health have the necessary memorandum of understanding and information systems in place. This is the first time that this approach has been used to determine free and reduced price meals eligibility. Now, shifting your focus to the county and municipal aid, Baltimore County will receive $36.6 million in county and municipal aid, which represents a $1.8 million or 5.2% increase from the prior year. Baltimore County will receive $12.8 million in funding under the existing police aid formula. And the majority of state funding under the police aid formula is based on population density. More urbanized jurisdictions with a higher population density receive a higher per capita grant amount. A small component of the formula targets funding to municipalities based on the number of sworn officers. Funding in fiscal 2024 is based on $1,950 per sworn officer. And since fiscal 2004, local governments must reimburse the state for 30% of the state police crime lab costs, which will total $5.7 million in fiscal 2024. The reimbursements are based on local crime rates and local wealth. The Baltimore County share of these costs will total $754,000 in fiscal 2024, and the local reimbursement is deducted from each jurisdiction's police aid amount. State funding also includes $7.1 million in enhanced funding based on the number of violent crime offenses occurring within the county. Baltimore County will receive $1.7 million in fire and rescue aid in fiscal 2024, and each county's funding is based on their share of property tax accounts relative to the statewide total. Each county is guaranteed a minimum 2% share of total funds, approximately $300,000. Baltimore County will receive $7.5 million in local health grants in fiscal 2024. Statewide local health departments will receive $115.8 million, which represents a $14.5 million or 14.3% increase from the prior year. Now moving to transportation aid, the state provides capital transportation grants to local governments based on the amount of revenue allocated to the gasoline and motor vehicle revenue account. And this funding is allocated to local governments through the Local Highway User Revenues Program. Legislation enacted at the 2022 session increased the local share of highway user revenues beginning in fiscal 2024, whereby state funding to local governments is based on 15.6% of total GMVRA revenues. Of this amount, 60.9% goes to Baltimore City, 23.7% goes to county governments, and 15.4% goes to municipalities. These distributions increase for fiscal 2025 through fiscal 2027, and beginning in fiscal 2028, the allocations revert to the fiscal 2024 distribution as shown in the table. Baltimore County will receive $11.5 million in local highway user revenues in fiscal 2024, which represents a $2 million or 20.9% increase over the prior year. The county and municipal share is based on road mileage and vehicle registration. I will now turn it over to Valerie.
Good morning, Chair and members of the delegation. Thank you, Arnold. I will now look at the local library and community college aid. Baltimore County will receive $7.5 million in local library aid and $75.3 million in state support for the local community college. State funding for the Community College of Baltimore County will increase by $10.3 million in fiscal 24. Over 85% of state aid to Baltimore County will go to public schools. The Baltimore County public school system will receive $902.8 million in direct aid in fiscal 24, which represents a $66.2 million or 7.9% increase from the prior year. In addition, the state will provide $94.2 million in funding for teacher retirement payments. We'll now look at student enrollment on page 45. The full-time equivalent student enrollment count decreases by 0.3% in Baltimore County compared to the statewide average increase of 0.5%. This results in 320 fewer students for the Baltimore County public school system. Currently, the county school system accounts for approximately 12.5% of students statewide. The number of students approved for the free and reduced price meal increases by 34.7% in Baltimore County compared to the statewide average increase of 34.2%. Baltimore County currently has the 12th highest percentage of students approved for the free and reduced price meal at 53.4% of total student enrollment. On page 47, we see that Baltimore County has the 6th highest percentage of students identified as English language learners at 10.4% of total student enrollment. In fiscal 24, the number of English language learner students increases by 7.7%, resulting in around 800 additional students requiring language services. On page 48, We see that Baltimore County has an above average share of students receiving special education services. In fiscal 24, the number of students receiving special education services accounts for 14.9% of total enrollment, compared to the statewide average of 13.3%. On page 49, this exhibit shows the change in student enrollment counts from the pre-COVID baseline. While there is a slight increase in statewide full-time equivalent student enrollment count for the current school year, when compared to the 2019-2020 school year, student enrollment statewide is down by 2.5%. In Baltimore County, the student enrollment is down by 3.5%. In several small rural counties like Kent and Garrett, the decrease exceeds 8%. Only 3 school systems have realized increase in student enrollment since the COVID-19 pandemic. They include Carroll, Charles, and Frederick counties. As stated earlier in our presentation, due to the new approach to measure students eligible for the free and reduced price meals, local school systems have experienced an increase in the student count since the COVID pandemic. Baltimore County is the only exception. Baltimore County has the 9th highest targeted student index in the state at 78.7%. This index adds together the percent share of the full-time equivalent students who are approved for the free and reduced price meal, English language learners, and special education services. The targeted student index ranges from 38.6% in Calvert County to 118.5% in Baltimore City, with a statewide average at 76.6%. This measure is important in that it illustrates that a considerable portion of students in the Baltimore County public school system comes from an educational or economically disadvantaged background. Statewide, public school enrollment represents 13.8% of the total state population. In Baltimore County, public school enrollment represents 12.6% of the overall county population. In comparison, Kent County has the lowest share, with public school enrollment accounting for 8.6% of total county population, whereas Howard County has the highest share at 16.8%. I'll now turn it back over to Arnold, who will provide a walkthrough of our system. Thank you.
Thanks. So before we open up for questions, we briefly want to show you how you can access all of our state aid resources. So starting from the Maryland General Assembly website, you can access the Department of Legislative Services website by clicking on the hyperlink located on the top right corner of the screen. Once on the DLS homepage, you will click on the Budget tab, followed by the State Aid to Local Governments subtab. To the right, we provide a small snapshot of the fiscal 2024 allowance. And to the left, we have all of our state aid resources broken down into different sections. Under state aid reports, you can access our two-year charts by government entity. We also provide two-year charts by program. The first couple of pages are reserved for the statewide figures, and we also provide county-specific numbers for the different programs. We also prepare state aid data dashboards. The first one is the one that's on our main page, which is an annual change in state aid from fiscal 2015 to 2024. We have a pie chart showing the share of state aid increase by program and two maps, one of the per capita state aid and another of the annual percent change. Under session reports, we have the full overview of state aid to local governments report, which we just presented. And as soon as the numbers are revised, we hope to provide with short 5-page summary reports on the state aid to each county. And finally, under highlighted, users can download state aid data going back through 2010, and you can do so by county or statewide. That's it, and we will open it up for any questions that you may have.
Thank you both very much for that. I'm going to take a look. I have two questions myself, and then we'll open it up to questions from other folks. One's a rather specific question, one's a more general one. Specifically, I'm looking at page 22 of this report. I never like to see us in last place. It's local highway users revenue per capita. Our per capita seems to be significantly lower than other counties. I'm sure there's a reason for it, but it would make me feel better to know perhaps why Baltimore County is below $14. I see one other in our range, which is Howard County, which is just low with us, but not quite there.
Probably the primary factor is that Arnold, can you move back to the exhibit? The factor is that a greater share of the split between county and municipal governments, a slightly higher amount goes to municipalities. So that's the one factor, is that since Baltimore County does not have municipalities, those funds are not provided there. So you can see that for Baltimore and Howard County, they do get a slightly lower share. So that's the primary factor. The allocation between counties and municipalities is based on road mileage, and it's based on vehicle registration, but the municipalities do get when you compare the number of people in municipalities versus the number of people in counties, there is slightly more funds going to the municipal side on a per capita basis than the county side.
Okay, that's structural then. Thank you. The other one is, I heard at the top, I heard that there was a reconsideration or recomputation of the compensatory based on NTI. Sounded like as much as $30 million less increase. I understand it was still an increase, but 30 million less. My question is, how far in advance was the county and the school system made aware of this, since they're forming their budgets for 2024 back at the beginning of this month?
Right. So this basically is the timing issue, is that typically when we are developing funds for when the Department of Budget and Management is developing the governor's allowance, they use data from the comptroller's office that's posted at the beginning of December. And unfortunately, when the comptroller's office re-looked at their numbers, they released an updated report in January, and people were not aware of that. And in fact, by the time they updated their new revised report, the governor's allowance has already been introduced. So that is the reason why revisions are being made after the budget has been submitted. Now, DBM, Department of Legislative Services, and the Comptroller's Office is all working together to make sure that this does not happen again in the future. So I think everyone is aware that that report that's released by the Comptroller's Office in December is extremely important in determining these aid allocations. So I think everyone now knows that this is important and that this situation should not happen again. In addition, it's my understanding that the Comptroller's Office will have additional positions to help process these tax returns in a more timely manner. So this situation really should not happen again. But I think there's better communications going forward to make sure that this situation has been addressed.
And we let them know as early as we could once this was discovered, obviously.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. It's going to be, they might have had to make a few adjustments. Thank you.
And I do want to say that the numbers that we have presented to you today are the revised numbers.
Good. That was my next, I was going to ask you that.
Right. That is the reason why when you're looking at some of the education numbers, they don't really align up with what's in the state aid overview report, is because we're telling you the revised numbers. And And so that's the reason. It really affects primarily some of the education aid formulas and the disparity grant program. And the disparity grant program is not provided to Baltimore County since it's not a low wealth county.
Thank you. We're going to go to questions from some members of the delegation. We'll start with Delegate Shalega. Still muted at this point.
Sorry, took me a minute to get my mouse over there to unmute. Thanks for being here. Mr. Birch, this is my favorite report you all produce every year. And within this report, generally, there is a chart that has per pupil funding total, which is state, local, and federal. Can you point me to that chart?
Right. We have the per pupil funding, which hasn't been updated yet. That is on page 31. But I think the exhibit that you're referring to is in our state aid overview report, and that shows the federal, state, and local per pupil funding. We have information going back to FY21, but that's in another report. But we can show you where that is. Arnold, can you go to the
if you could, Mr. Birch, just get me a copy of that, or send me an email so we don't take up time from the delegation, because I see other people have questions. And
you send it to all of us, please.
Yeah, it's a great report.
Hold on. What anything that anybody asks for, you guys can send to the Baltimore County delegation mail, the one that communicated with you, and we'll just distribute everything to everybody so that any question they want will be answered. So if you'd make a note of that and send it to Justin, who is at BCOD and all that other stuff, we will make sure that all the members of the delegation get it.
Thank you. And one final question on the farms, the free and reduced meals. That can you re-explain to me how that formula changed? And because I think you said it's a 34% increase. I just drill down a little bit further on that, if you don't mind.
Yes. One of the recommendations of the current commission was to come up with a new approach to determine the number of students that are eligible for free reduced price meals. And one of the concerns educators had is that currently the past practice was having parents and students fill out applications for free reduced price meals. And there was concern, particularly in the middle school and high school area, that many students were concerned about how their peers would think of them if they actually received a free reduced price meal. So there wasn't it was less accurate reporting, because many eligible kids did not report themselves to be eligible for free reduced price meals. So what happened was that the current commission recommended that Medicaid eligibility be used to determine free reduced price meal eligibility once MSDE and the Department of Health had an information system in place. So this is the first time they are able to determine eligibility for free reduced price meals by using income data from Medicaid eligibility. Basically, it's the same income thresholds used within the both two programs. So once a student is eligible for Medicaid, they automatically become eligible for free reduced price meals. So that's the reason why the count went up so much, because there's a different approach to measuring who's eligible for free reduced price meal. And this is basically a more accurate count, because it's not people filling out forms at the school system level determining your eligibility. They're using data for Medicaid eligibility.
So with that in mind, as you probably, I'm sure, are aware, because you guys are very smart over there, Medicaid eligibility hasn't been verified because of COVID for a number of years. So generally speaking, we have a churn in Medicaid enrollment because people are, have to re-qualify. So with the re-enrollment processes in place, are we now going to see a wild dip?
That could be a possibility going forward, that the number of students eligible for free reduced price meals may go down if they are no longer eligible for Medicaid. And the as you said, the eligibility for Medicaid, they're going to start the evaluation process this year. So we may see fewer students eligible for free reduced price meals going forward. So this may be the high mark, and we don't expect significant increases going forward.
All right, well, I would request that you guys indicate that in future, so that when we see this report from you next year or the year after and the numbers go down, you remind us that, there was this re-eligibility, it was all frozen under COVID, so we can, make accommodations and allowances for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Birch and your team for being here.
And thank you, Delegate Schlegel. A question from Delegate Cardin, please.
Actually, I was just lowering my hand. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you guys for the great report. Delegate Schlegel actually asked my exact questions about the new formula with Medicaid.
I think we start that phrase off with great minds, and we know what happens after that. Let's go to Delegate Bhandari, please, your question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Birch. On page 45, it is reported that despite the ESOL student population growing by 10% overall population growth of our county, the system, our county public school system, has experienced a 3.5% decline in full-time student enrollment. With this information, what might be the underlying factor causing this decline, and what measures policymaker we can implement to ensure the equitable access to quality education for all students? It's kind of concerning.
I think what happened, what the experts are saying is that when COVID hit, there's some students that when the schools were closed, either the students went to private schools or did homeschooling. There's several different factors that could be in play here. I don't have, the exact data or reasons. We can try to have MSD kind of look into that for you, but there's several factors that the student enrollments just went down in certain jurisdictions. So that may be a question that we may want to raise to the Baltimore County public school system, but you can see it's basically statewide except in 3 jurisdictions. And the 3 jurisdictions are the ones that tend to have a more younger population. I think if you go to the exhibit on page 50, it kind of shows you that in Frederick County, they have one of the highest percentages of their county population that are public school students. So I think there's a lot of different factors that some of the jurisdictions that have more higher population growth, a younger population, they may be more inclined to have stayed in school. So there's several factors that were playing. And that's also a national phenomena as well. So it's just not Maryland that's experiencing this.
Thank you. Delegate, good. And now a final question. I see Delegate Pastor has her hand raised.
Thank you. First of all, let me thank you as well for this information. It certainly is good information to have. I look forward to that very comprehensive and composite information on our funding. So thank you for sending Delegate Ebersol that information for all of us. I want to go back to the meals program. I doubt that we're going to see a large decrease. It's good that the funding mechanism has been changed. We have been under reporting for years, just using free and reduce. And those of us in the schools always knew that because we knew that children were not returning the forms. So the numbers we're seeing are going to be seeing now with Medicaid in the mix will be more accurate. And we saw that increase, which was an interesting one when we started in Baltimore County using CEP as our benchmark for feeding children. We saw how those numbers went up, which told us that there were children who were on the fringe who absolutely deserved to have been fed, who weren't being fed. So thank you for giving us some different numbers, but don't expect to see a big drop as long as we are really looking at our children and their needs, because they still need that free meal. In terms of the drop in the student population, thank you for the list that you gave. You are right on it with going to private schools, homes, but also know, which is not just a part of Baltimore County, but all systems that are working on some level. We had a lot of out of area children. Some were out of area because of special education directives where there are some students who could come, go wherever they wanted to meet their needs, and also homelessness. So people tended to come to Baltimore County because they get to choose when they fall into certain categories of homelessness where they choose to go to school. So that stopped because of COVID. So I, again, thank you. This is a really good conversation about how we get funded and how we will use Blueprint to sort of lay out some of this. I know some people have that question about how will Blueprint support us without changing needs. So thank you for this information, and I look forward to the additional things that you will be sending us.
And I do want to indicate that once the governor submits a supplemental budget that provides additional funds to correct for the NTI in student enrollment, we will be revising this report and all of our state aid data very quickly. So it all will reflect the full amount that will be in the state budget. So that will be forthcoming fairly soon once we receive a supplemental budget.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. So there's hope. Thank you. All right, I think that concludes the questions that we have here. I wanted to say thank you to, I hope I noticed them all. 3 senators came, Senator Washington, Senator Selling, and Senator Brooks were here, and we appreciated their attendance here as well.
Great to be here.
Yeah, great. Always great to have you guys. Anytime we make sure that your delegation chair knows the meetings and what the agenda is, and you're welcome to hang in. You can also ask questions, by the way, during this part if you want to. So I know that you guys understand everything very clearly. So it's
no, I don't. I'm learning. I'm new to Baltimore County, so I'm just here listening and learning, and I'm happy to be here. I'm not going to intrude.
We repeat that we're glad to have you aboard. Okay. All right. That concludes the presentation of the fiscal briefing. We're going to move to voting on bills at this point, and we have 3 bills that are up for possible voting. And we're going to do them in numerical order here. The first bill is House Bill 381, which is due process proceedings for children with disabilities, shifting the burden of proof. This would be a bill that would have been handled by the Education Subcommittee. Looking around, I'm sure she's here. There she is. The Chair Forbes on that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were 2 amendments presented to the bill, and the Education Subcommittee hasn't had a chance to consider them yet. So we ask that this be moved till next week for voting.
Okay, since there is some action that needs to take place on this, without objection, we would like to hold this bill for another week. Okay, seeing no significant objection, we'll do that. Thank you for that report. Our next one is House Bill 1111, Baltimore County Insurance Certificates of Guarantee for County Bond Requirements. This was handled by the Committee on Community Affairs, and that would be Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Community Affairs Subcommittee met and voted on House Bill 1111, and the vote was unanimous favorable, so I move favorable.
Okay, we have a favorable motion on behalf of the committee. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Thank you. I don't sense a lot of objection to this. So unless someone wants to make a roll call, ask for a roll call at this point, I'm going to ask for a vote by raising your hand. Make sure your cameras are on. And then we'll give anybody who wants to say no to this a chance to do so. All in favor of House Bill 111, favorable report to the committee, raise your hands, please. And are there any objections? Jackson's hand's still up, but it was up for the favorable. I'm going to assume that he just didn't take it back down. He's working from a cell phone somewhere in that's always a little trickier. So House Bill 111 has been moved favorable by Baltimore County. We will send a letter of our favorable report to the appropriate committee. The next bill is House Bill 1171. This is Baltimore County speed monitoring systems in residential districts. This would go to the Public Safety Subcommittee. Chair is Delegate Carden. Delegate Carden, does this committee have a report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The subcommittee attempted to meet on, I think it was Thursday, and we did not have a quorum. So while we did have a little bit of discussion about the bill, I'm gonna ask you to hold it before, so that we can try and make a recommendation for the subcommittee.
Okay, and I will remind people that I know subcommittee, it meets somewhat sporadically, and there's a very small number of us. And so if your chair is trying to get you together, make every effort. Sometimes these meetings don't take very long. Make every effort to be there so that we can move forward with legislation in both of these cases for the two bills. And without objection, we will hold this bill for a week. Okay, so done. That concludes the voting portion of our agenda today. We now move to one bill that we have a hearing on, so that we can hear about this bill for future consideration. This is a bill given by Delegate Naraki, House Bill 1096, Baltimore County property tax exemption, real property owned by fire company or rescue squad. And we'll go to the sponsor, Delegate Naraki, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 1 second, just grabbing my document here. Thank you, Mr. Chair and colleagues. Appreciate your time this morning. For the record, I'm Delegate Ryan Naraki, asking for a favorable motion on House Bill 1096. As a member of a local volunteer fire department, I've seen firsthand how important it is to support the safety of our communities. First responders need our full and committed support for all the sacrifices that are made by the men and women that form all of our volunteer fire departments. I aim to reduce their expenses by proposing a property tax exemption on the additional land owned by volunteer fire and rescue companies. These additional properties include former locations of firehouses, prospective future firehouse sites, fairgrounds, and lands often used for fundraisers such as carnivals or bazaars. Looking at the financials, comparing volunteer fire stations budgets to a typical career house, the numbers are fairly stark. Baltimore County gave a total financial support last year of $241,748 to Middle River Volunteer Fire and Rescue Company to help cover their operational expenses. This number is a rough annual average for the other 28 volunteer stations across the county. Remember that the operational expenses in a fiscal year do not account for future development, planning, and capital expenses. But in this case, breaking even is not the goal. Volunteer fire companies seek to invest in new equipment, gear, and supplies. Middle River Volunteer Fire and Rescue Company, for instance, recently had to spend $80,000 to put a unit back into service, which repairs like these often aren't always projected for in their annual budget. Also, many companies are hoping to invest in future firehouses or simply just to be able to maintain their fleets when needed. As a result, what they must do is fundraise endlessly. I've reviewed Middle River Volunteer Fire and Rescue's fiscal year 2022 profit and loss sheet. It lists income from a bull roast, a boot drive, a Christmas fund, a fall fund, a spring fund, additional donations, and other events. This is a busy fundraising calendar on top of the real work of emergency responses. This amount of work often necessitates hiring a full-time development director for a typical nonprofit. These firefighters shouldn't be fundraising to pay for property taxes. They should be fundraising for new equipment, gear, or improvements to the station. These are the types of line items on the expense sheet that ultimately benefit the citizens of Baltimore County and our districts, and the tools that are necessary to engage in life-saving activities. It's instructive to compare a volunteer firehouse and the career fire department's numbers in Baltimore County's fiscal year 2023 proposed budget. The fiscal year 2023 budget totals $121.5 million for the fire department. Out of that $121.5 million, only 10.7 is allocated to volunteer fire companies. So to calculate that on average, the career stations will cost roughly $4.4 million each in fiscal year 23 to operate, and are fully funded by the county. That's a far cry from the $241,000 that was given to Middle River in fiscal year 2022 to cover their operating expenses. So a volunteer fire station then on average costs the taxpayers 5% of a typical career station in Baltimore County, $241,000 versus 4.4 million. To acknowledge the cost savings that the 29 volunteer fire companies give to Baltimore County as a whole, this legislation is critical. And this is in no way meant to be reflective negatively on the valuable and necessary work of our career fire service, but rather to highlight the significant financial value volunteer fire departments offer Baltimore County. This tax credit will incentivize these much needed volunteer organizations to continue their good work that provides an invaluable service to the community and a significant cost savings to Baltimore County. By not allowing this credit, we're only disincentivizing volunteer companies to make future improvements upon their facilities or to properly maintain their facilities that often provide valuable and much needed open space to many communities. Supporters of this legislation include the Baltimore County Volunteer Firefighters Association and the entire Baltimore County Council. Was grateful to receive that unanimous support, particularly from our former delegation chair, Councilman Pat Young. And I'm working with the Baltimore County Executive's Office, who's also going to offer some testimony here today. Even the leadership of volunteer fire companies that would not receive this credit because it does not apply to their properties, such as White Marsh Volunteer Fire Company, Long Green Volunteer Fire Company, and Liberty Road Volunteer Fire Company, are united in support of this legislation. So having said all that, I'm asking for your favorable report on this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you, Delegate Naraki. We have 6 individuals who have signed up to testify. Our typical time period is 2 minutes to testify. And so I would like to, if you have a watch, keep an eye on it. We're going to try to keep it moving along nicely, but I'm sure you can certainly give us your level of support in that period of time. We're pleased to have Councilman David Marks from the Baltimore County Council, and we will go to him first, please. Councilman Marks.
Thank you very much, Delegate Ebersol and members of the Baltimore County delegation. I'm going to be very brief because I know your time is limited. I'd like to thank Delegate Naraki for his sponsorship of this bill. As you know, Baltimore County has a unique arrangement in which the extraordinary work of our career fire stations is supplemented by our volunteer fire stations. And this partnership helps guarantee that we have the safest neighborhoods possible. This bill, as you know, would allow for real property owned by volunteer fire companies and rescue squads to be exempt from paying property tax, provided that enabling legislation is passed by the County Council and signed by the County Executive. As Delegate Naraki said, this would free up precious resources that our volunteer fire stations could use for gear and station improvements. And we see some of the stations here today are also interested in long-term improvement projects. As Delegate Naraki mentioned, all 7 members of our County Council endorsed this legislation, reflecting broad bipartisan support from the 4 Democratic and 3 Republican members. I'd also like to thank the County Executive for his strong support of public safety and his participation in this process. So in conclusion, thank you very much for your consideration of a favorable vote for this legislation.
And thank you, Councilman. Nice timing. Well done. We'll go next to Susan Bollinger, who is from the Baltimore County Volunteer Firefighters Association.
Good morning. I'm Susan Bollinger, and I'm the president of the Baltimore County Volunteer Firefighters Association. And I'm here to testify on our support of this bill. And this bill will support 7 of our member companies on additional parcels that they have. And not all of these parcels are even fundraising parcels. Some of these parcels are adjacent properties that companies have so that they can do parking that's required for their stations, or just property that they need to get egress to their property. And as everyone else has stated, those that are fundraising, although we're so grateful for all the support we get, not just from our county, but from the state, it does not cover all of our operating expenses, and our companies have no choice but to do fundraising and any help that we could give them so that they could put more money in their coffers to take away from those fundraising hours and let their people be on the equipment, on the street, helping our communities and getting service, especially in areas where, you know, we have underserved citizens, this money would be a great help. So I thank you all for your time today and hope that you will support the bill.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we'll go to Matthew Runyon from the Upper Cove Volunteer Fire Company.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, delegates. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak on behalf of House Bill 1096. As I was introduced, I am the Assistant Fire Chief of the Upper Cove Volunteer Fire Company, one of the member companies that would benefit from this bill. Those who are not aware, the Upper Cove Volunteer Fire Company was consolidated as a result of the combination of two traditional volunteer fire company organizations, the Arcadia and Boring Volunteer Fire Companies in northwestern Baltimore County about 5 years ago. Over that time, Upper Cove has had the pleasure of working with Baltimore County to fund the construction of a new public safety facility and station located within the combined area of those two companies. However, in order to support our new station and our continued operations and ability to support our communities, we do rely heavily on fundraising, which entails the use of a large parcel of property still located in our first due area right on the Baltimore-Carroll County line, which, you know, obviously is subject to property taxes separate from our station facility. Over the past 3 fiscal years, those property taxes have been in the range of $8,300 to $8,700 a year. So relatively significant expense for a volunteer fire service to incur. And, you know, we are definitely in support of this bill. We appreciate your consideration and the partnership from the county and looking to assist us in being able to provide the highest level of safety and emergency services to our citizens in our community and neighboring communities as well. And we certainly appreciate your consideration of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Runyon. Next, we have Mr. William Connolly from the Middle River Volunteer Fire and Rescue Company.
All right. Thank you, guys. Good morning, Chair, delegates, and guests. My name is Bill Connolly, President of Middle River Volunteer Fire and Rescue Company, MRVFR for short. MRVFR is a result of 2 volunteer stations, Middle River Volunteer Fire Company and Middle River Volunteer Fire and Rescue Company, consolidating in 2015. MRVFR serves Eastern Baltimore County citizens in Legislative District 7A, with some of our apparatus responding to as far as Dundalk and to the Harford County line in the Legislative District 6 and 8. MRVFR has one of the most diverse amounts of emergency apparatus in Baltimore County, with an engine, squad, truck, medic, and dive unit. We have over 200 volunteers, with some more active than others. We operate out of a fire station built in the 1940s, with an addition built in the early 80s. MRVFR was donated 7 acres in our first due area to become the future site of our new fire station, which we are currently in a design phase with architects. MRVFR had to purchase a property next to this donated property to help make this future station possible. In 2021, MRVFR was operating out of those 2 stations, and we condensed our operations into 1 station, selling off one of the stations in the property. We pay over $9,000 a year in property taxes currently. MRVFR is a small budget company compared to some of our other volunteer stations in this county. We are a good example of Baltimore County's motto, doing more with less. We spend most of our money to maintain our apparatus, tools, supplies, and aging facility to provide emergency services to our community. While we only cost the county approximately $240,000 in financial support each year, we save millions in taxpayer dollars in staffing and operating costs if it were a career station. HB 1096 will be beneficial to both MRVFR and the citizens we serve, helping us to redirect our money into helping operations to save lives and property in Baltimore County. Thank you for your consideration of this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly. Perfect. Right at the end of 2. Well done. Next, we have Joel McCrae from the Long Green Volunteer Fire Company. Mr. McCrae.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Madam Speaker, members of the delegation. My name is Joel McCray. I'm here to testify in favor of House Bill 1096. In addition to being from Long Green, being past president of Long Green, I'm also the past president of the Baltimore County Volunteer Firefighters Association and the Maryland State Firemen's Association. I've also served on Baltimore County's Capital Revolving Loan Fund Board and was instrumental in establishing the Volunteer Company Assistance Fund for the state of Maryland. So in addition to the information you've already heard this morning, I'd like to tell you that the volunteer fire service has gone through many changes in recent years. The cost of equipment and operating and maintaining the station has increased significantly, and it has become more difficult to recruit and retain volunteers. But what has not changed is a continuing struggle to raise sufficient funds to maintain operations and fund capital expenditure. So in order to survive, we have seen volunteer companies merge. In all cases where these companies have merged, a new station has been needed a location more central to the new service area in order to provide the most efficient response to the citizens of Baltimore County and surrounding areas. After the merger, selling the facilities that are no longer needed can take an extended period because, as you can imagine, these buildings were built for a fire station, not easily repurposed. These properties then no longer qualify to be exempt from property taxes. The expense of carrying these properties can be a significant expense for the volunteer companies. But also, what's also been noted is there are companies that have been operating out of the current locations for many years. But these companies are now in need of more modern and larger facilities. Again, selling these old stations is very difficult and can take an extended period of time, and the carrying costs can be significant. We therefore are respectfully requesting a favorable vote on House Bill 1096 to assist the nonprofit fire companies located in Baltimore County by exempting all properties owned by these companies from a property tax. Thank you.
And thank you very much. And Delegate Naraki, you're 6 for 6 for your witnesses there for being timely. And we certainly do appreciate that. I'm interested, have had some feedback from county government, and I know Jen Aosa is here online. And oh, wait, I'm sorry. Let's do this first. Does anyone have any questions at this point? We have favorable reports and we have the sponsor there. Are there any questions for them on this bill at this time? All right. I thought the hands would have popped up anyway, but I thought I'd better make sure that we're open for it. I don't believe this is necessarily unfavorable, but we do need the county government to weigh in also. So Ms. Aosa, if you would turn your camera on and give us a little background on where the county government is on this right now.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the delegation. County Executive Olszewski is very pleased to be able to support this effort. We have spoken with the sponsor, Delegate Naraki. We have suggested what we refer to as a friendly amendment to make sure that any tax relief that is offered to our volunteer companies is applied to properties that are used or intended for use in the future for the activities of the company, fire suppression, EMS, et cetera. And we see this as really, truly a very modest effort that we feel very comfortable supporting. So I'm happy to work with the sponsor, with members of the delegation, and happy that we're able to support this. Thank you very much.
And thank you. Moved a little quickly there. We actually did skip a positive witness, and I apologize to Shannon Stallings for that. Shannon Stallings, if you're still here online, we would love to hear your testimony. Just move a little quickly through the list there.
No
Deep
problem,
apologies,
no problem
and you're up.
No problem at all. You can hear me okay, I take it?
We can, yes, we can.
Pardon my back setting, but the pickup truck is the quietest place in my household when you have 4 children. So my name is Shannon Stallings. I'm the Chief Officer of the Bowley's Quarters Volunteer Fire Department. And I wanted to share from experience what one of the things that, we struggle with when it comes with land and property tax. We are, by nature, our entire service area is in Critical Bay area. So anytime we go to make a station improvement or to advance our service from our current location, we have to acquire land to put into mitigation. If we want to expand our parking lot, add apparatus base, things of that nature. We've been doing this for years. Since 1992, we've paid over $75,000 in property taxes just for land that is wooded and swamp. And this takes away from our fundraising efforts. It's very difficult for our legacy members to keep up with modern fundraising. And they often still stick with things like bull roast and shrimp feasts and vendor sales and shows like that. And just a recent example is we had 20 legacy members host a breakfast with Santa Claus over the holidays, put a lot of smiles on children's faces, in which they raised $4,400, which they think they're raising it for a good cause and to put it towards replacing EMS equipment and aging fire equipment. But unfortunately, I have to go to them and say, hey, look, $4,400 is a valiant effort, but all of that is going towards our property taxes for both our mitigation sites and our future construction site of 12 acres, which we can only develop 2 acres of it because of the LDA in the critical Bay area. So this is just it's probably a one-off example, but it's how we are affected. We have to buy this property to improve our service on our existing property, and we're paying property taxes on it, and it's taking away from necessary funds and resources for other areas of our service delivery.
And I assume you're complete. Don't want to cut you off.
Yes, no.
Okay. And again, apologies. Now we're 6 for 6, Delegate Naraka. We were 5 for 5 before. I had my staff saying, "What are you doing?" Nothing. I'm making a mistake. So I do see a hand up, and Delegate Metzger, for whomever you think wants to ask a question, you may address it in any direction you want.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually addressing this to you.
Oh.
I've never done this before, but with the entirety of the Baltimore County delegation signing on, with the county executive agreeing and approving of this, I would like to say or make a motion that we do a vote on this to take it right to where it needs to go.
Okay. Well, given that the county executive has indicated that they might have potential amendments they would like the subcommittee to consider, I think it's noble. The entire delegation hasn't signed on. Who has signed on in their entirety is the county council,
That's
which
right.
is also significant, but it's not this body. So I'm not sure we have unanimity on this at this point. I appreciate the effort, but I would like to not bring that motion forward at this time. It's not our normal procedure to do so unless we feel like we really have.
I understand.
100%. And so thank you for the effort. And unless somebody wants to press that, I'm going to resist bringing that forward at this point.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Rocky.
I do have language that I'm working with the county executive's office on. It is a very friendly amendment language. So hopefully we'll have that language very soon drafted. I've already asked for that to be drafted. And I think, that should mitigate any concerns that the county executive's office may have. And I would hope at that point that we could maybe consider a favorable motion at that point.
And I appreciate that you are interacting with the county executive's office and working toward what is, maybe some sort of compromise or some sort of reasonable way of looking at this legislation. It is important to point out from the chair that this bill is actually imposes local mandate. While I know it's not significant, this tax bill comes to between $50,000 and $100,000 a year. Would reduce that. We also need to, as a group, consider whether we think that's a good precedent for us to set, something else for us to consider at this time. But that for me is actually for the subcommittee in this case. And hopefully they'll be able to get together this week and we'll have a report next week on some of these things. We're done with business. I have one request for something for the good of the order, Delegate Shalega.
Thank you, Chair Eversole. I wanted to give you all an update on the letter that you all received from my office and Delegate Rocky's office, wherein we're advocating for state troopers disabled in the line of duty to be added to the tax credit that Baltimore County police officers disabled in the line of duty get. And we were going to send it yesterday, but I had some conversations with County Executive Olszewski's office, and they are working with me on it. Not opposed. We're thinking it might be 3 to 5 people total that would be able to collect this, benefit, which would be very minimal. So they're not, they're willing to work with me on it. We're still going to send the letter. So thanks. I've heard from a number of you that in a bipartisan fashion that want to sign the letter. Please look for your email and send me an email back today if you want to sign on to that letter. We're going to get it off later today. But it's looking pretty favorable that I think, no guarantees here, but the county executive's office was willing to look at it and, thought it sounded like a good idea. So thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Schlega. And that's an important note for all of you that Delegate Schlega has sidestepped legislation because it wasn't necessary here. And that if we can get policy done without legislation, that's a much less heavy-handed way to get it done. Also, you all have access to Ms. Ayosa and Amanda Coons-Carr, who also, if you have something to suggest, remember that's a great way to communicate with them as well. And I encourage you all to do that. They pick up the phone very regularly and very well. We're done with business again. Is there anything else for the good of the order from any member of the delegation? Seeing no hands, I'm going to adjourn this meeting until next week. We will see you all on the floor.